Welcome to Green and Red, Scrappy Politics for Scrappy People, a regular podcast on radical environmental and anti-capitalist politics, brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I'm your co-host Scott Parkin in Berkeley, California today, and as always, I am joined by
it's Bob Bazanko, as always, and not as always, but today in Houston, Texas.
Yeah,
ready to throw it down and get scrappy.
Yeah, let's get scrappy. We're both very high energy tonight. Yeah, so folks, we're going to talk a little bit about politics, and we're going to talk a little bit about global politics, and we're just going to be scrappy, and we're going to have a good time tonight. I'll kick us off a little bit with some This Week in Radical History, just to throw a couple out there that I think they're like fairly relevant to what's happening in the world right now, and they're fairly relevant to what's happening domestically in the U.S. The first one I want to throw out is on November 3rd in 1979 in Greensboro, North Carolina. There was a massacre where 5 communist anti-racist activists at an anti-Klan protest were murdered by members of the Klan, the KKK, and the American Nazi Party, and who were also helped by the shadow Klan that we all like to refer to as the police, who actually gave them a map of where the anti-racists were and basically had intelligence that they fed to the Klan and to the American Nazi Party.
That's the Ku Klux Klan, right?
The Ku Klux Klan, exactly. Oh, good. Played, Bob, played. And so a little bit of a theme today is going to be around political violence. This is a good example of that. My other one that I'm going to throw out there is on November 3rd in 1970, a regional office of the United Farm Workers Union in California was bombed. The UFW, which was made up largely of Latino and Filipino workers, had been on strike for weeks in a jurisdictional dispute with the Teamsters Union. And so we have this history of political violence in the U.S. that is not always recognized, not always acknowledged. And then the last one that I wanted to mention, which will segue into some of what we're going to riff on today, is in November 2nd in 1920, wobbly socialist and labor leader Eugene V. Debs received nearly 1 million votes for president, running from his prison cell. He was actually in jail for resisting the draft from World War I. We've actually talked about that a couple of times in the past. I still actually have it on my list to do that. We do a Debs episode at some point. And then I want to also use that to segue into some contemporary politics that's going on. We often have heard people in the Jacobin socialist sphere refer to Bernie Sanders as a modern Eugene Debs. I think they've referred to AOC as this as well. And we also have seen comparisons of Trump to Eugene Debs, because he could indeed be running. He may be running for president from his prison cell, although he does not have the integrity or militancy or courage of a Eugene Debs. But the person who I actually feel like isn't most in the tradition of Debs in contemporary politics today is really been putting it out there lately is Rashida Tlaib, who is the only Palestinian American member of Congress. On our last Scrappy Sunday, we actually talked about how Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to get her censored in the House for being anti-Semitic, which is ironic since Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about things like Jewish space lasers and things like that. The real and supported the real Nazis marching in Charlottesville, just to put that out there, and all of those other American nationalist types, the kind of people who assassinated communist organizers in 1979 in Greensboro. But Tlaib is also, she has bigger game that she's going after, not just the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, but she's also going after her own party, and she's taken aim at Biden and Harris. And she has been, vociferously targeting Biden and Harris around their continued support of the Israeli war machine. $13 billion. She put a statement out this week. $14.3 billion went to Israel that could have gone to infrastructure, which could have gone to healthcare, which could have gone to student debt relief. And instead, we're just funding this attack. I don't even want to call it a war, because I feel like it's just a mass murder of a civilian population in Gaza. Rashida Tlaib is probably about to get a whole lot of She's already probably getting lots of death threats, but there's going to be a lot of political backlash on her from the Democrats and the Israel lobby. But if there is an American politician these days who's in the tradition of Eugene Debs, it's Rashida Tlaib.
Yeah, and Ilhan Omar's been pretty good, but not nowhere near as outspoken as Tlaib. She released a video on her Twitter account, which actually uses the G word, genocide. So there's no coming back from that. And especially since she's been warned about it and everything, and she's just doubled down, which is good. That's the way you have to do this. It's a horrible situation, and we'll be doing more stuff on this. But you mentioned Debs in prison. So the one thing that I kind of had in my mind, and I think we'll just have a conversation about this, is that we're recording this on the 4th. And so tomorrow, or whenever it's out, it'll be the 5th. Anyway, we're a year away from the election of 2024. It's November 5th, 2024. And 3 years ago this week, Biden defeated Trump. And obviously elections are always held the first week in November. So I thought that we could talk a little bit about that, since the left is really has, I've always called it a fetish for elections. They want Cornel West to run. They want Bernie Sanders to run. They want whoever, the Greens, to run. We need a third party. We need a third party. And as if these elections are going to become the salvation of all of our, hopes and dreams.
Sure, Rashida Tlaib will be in that mix at some point with the people who want her to run.
She does great work where she is. I suspect they'll try to primary her. I know her district has a significant Arab population in it, but they're going to come after her with all their firepower, the Democratic Party, AIPAC, all of them. So we'll see how that plays out. But in the first year in 2020, when we started, we did a couple of shows where we talked a little bit about how America evolved into this right-wing country. And I just wanted to go back and talk about that a little bit because it's important. It's an important history lesson. As we're seeing now, history lessons are important, right? The media wants us to believe that everything that's gone wrong in the Middle East started on October 7th, right? It was like a blank slate. It had no history until that. And that's incredibly dangerous. We ignore those things at our own peril.
Because this is a person that I'm sure it'll come up tonight, but a person we like to beat up on is Obama actually put a statement out talking about what's happening to the Palestinians is unbearable. But we also have this history of anti-Semitism, neglecting the 75-year Nakba and the occupation wars against the Palestinians by the American-backed Israeli state.
Yeah, it was just mush, which is the guy never really had much of a backbone. And you're seeing this right now. And Blinken and Biden, they're gunning for a seat in The Hague. They won't, but in a real world they would. But anyway, since elections are a big deal, and going back to the 60s, the United States was a very liberal country. It really was. And in the 1964 election, Lyndon Johnson, and not just Democrats, but liberal Democrats won huge. I forget how many seats they had in the Senate and the House. And Johnson was pursuing what for the U.S. was actually a quite progressive agenda, Great Society and civil rights and all that kind of stuff. Also the war in Vietnam, but that hadn't really escalated out of control yet. But then 4 years later, obviously the country in just 4 years made a huge turn to the right. And to a large degree, this is because the right began to hit the Democratic Party on its failures, and especially, I think, its abandonment of what they would call the white working class. And you had the Southern strategy. Kevin Phillips, who just died not long ago, and Pat Buchanan were really important in that. And so Nixon played these racial fears and these cultural fears. And this is when you start to see that, the cultural issues and stuff like that. Lee Atwater would later say that in the old days, you could just say, go to Southerners and use the N-word. You can't do that anymore. So you have to come up with all these other kind of codes so they know what you're talking about, like taxes and welfare and crime and all that kind of stuff.
Law and order.
Yeah, law and order, which a lot of people internalize as a racial or cultural issue. And we've even, I think, didn't we in the first year show that video from the Goldwater campaign in '64, where he has these images of people getting drunk and people doing drugs and people having sex and transgendered people and all that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party, and this is the problem, the Democratic Party never had a counter offensive to it. Every time it was attacked, it would just move further to the right. And so in 1968, Nixon won. And the Democrats like to say it was a close election, but actually it really wasn't. Humphrey got low 40s, 41% of the vote. George Wallace ran and won. What did he run? 3 or 4 southern states or maybe more?
Yeah.
If he hadn't won those states, Nixon would have. Clearly the country had made a shift. And the Democratic Party really abandoned it in 1972. And we talked to Noam Chomsky about this about a year or so ago. Remember, they just bailed on McGovern. And you had a group of Democrats, these new Democrats, including prominently Jimmy Carter, Governor Jimmy Carter of Georgia, who really wanted to flip the party. And this is really when you start to see that transition. This is 50 years ago. And ever since then, we've had this drumbeat to the right without any real challenge to it. And look at who the Democrats nominated in that period. Carter won, which was, in retrospect, dismal. It would have been better probably if he lost and not created that, right, neoliberal and approach. And mostly here, we're talking about, I think, kind of stuff that's happening in the U.S. Because when it comes to things like wars and intervention, there's never really been any difference between the two parties. You had factions in the Democratic Party which turned against the Vietnam War. You had factions in the Democratic Party in the 80s who questioned the Contra War and stuff like that. But for the most part, these things are always...
Didn't you also have factions in the Republican Party that opposed the Vietnam War?
Vietnam, yeah. Vietnam just became untenable for everybody, including the ruling class.
Yeah.
But Carter ran and really made this major transition to the right in his economic policies, deregulations, his foreign policies, and everything else, which segued perfectly into Reagan. Now, Carter's downfall, a lot of it came because of what's happening in the Middle East, right? What's going on today. A good chance it'll be Biden's downfall, too, at this point, unless something bizarre happens. I just can't see him winning next year, a year, November 5th next year. But and then look at the candidates. You have Carter, then you have Walter Mondale, Mike Dukakis. And amid this, Reagan comes up with this really hardcore. It was an outreach to working class people, right? Are you better off than you were 4 years ago today? You're paying taxes that go to welfare and stuff like that, which most people know what that meant, right? This was occurring at a time of deindustrialization. And early deindustrialization starts in the 70s, like Youngstown, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and places like that. Democrats don't do anything about it. Jimmy Carter didn't do anything for the Youngstown workers. We talked to Stott and Lind about that one. Yeah. So the Democratic Party at that point had abandoned these constituencies that had held it. And from that point on, it's really this kind of, I wouldn't even call it an erosion. I would call it like a landslide, a mudslide to the right. So you have Reagan winning and crushing Dukakis. And then in Mondale. And then in 1988, the Democratic Party nominates Michael Dukakis, which be hard pressed to find a more uninspiring candidate, let's say.
Massachusetts.
Yeah. And the Republican Party is pinning Dukakis on issues like abortion and affirmative action and the death penalty. And one of the things, and we talk about this all the time, these are issues on which the Democrats actually have majority support, guns, all this stuff. They have majority support, and they still run away from it, right? Right. So you have the Republican Party. Look at the new Speaker of the House, this guy, the Republican Speaker of the House. He's utterly insane, right? This guy is nuts. He should be like a tent minister in the South. He should be going around like pitching his tent and having revivals, right? And
instead he's Speaker of the House.
He's Speaker of the House. And he says things that even most Republicans don't believe. It doesn't matter. He's Speaker of the House, right? Yeah. And then you see, I think in many ways, one of the biggest turns maybe in contemporary political history came in 1992, right? Because this is when the Democratic Party just became the Republican Party of the 1960s and 70s with Bill Clinton. Clinton is part of that corporatist movement. He's well connected. He wants to end welfare as we know it. You get welfare reform, which essentially guts welfare for a lot of people. A lot of working people lost their benefits, and so they had to go back to work and couldn't because they had children to take care of or they had medical problems or something like that. So you really saw this. And Clinton also, maybe more importantly than anything, and we really should do a whole show on this, is he's the guy behind NAFTA. And in the election of 2016, one of the key markers was that Trump won in the areas that were most affected by NAFTA. So if you go into an area that was perceived as having lost jobs due to NAFTA, Trump won those areas big. And that was part of the pitch, right? Clinton gave you NAFTA, Hillary and Bill gave you NAFTA. And so the Democratic Party by the 90s clearly has abandoned working class people. And I think the assumption was always that it could lose some of those white votes because it was running so powerfully. At the time, what did Clinton get? 92, 94% of the black vote? It was huge. Yeah. He's from Arkansas. He's a Southerner. Some of his followers said he's the first black president, which is just really offensive. But you saw that and you start to see, and you remember that's when you came of age politically. And it's a very different world at that point.
Yeah, but he's basically in 92, he's able to mobilize these traditional Democratic bases like one last time. Like Labor's behind him and blacks are behind him. But he's really, the real shift is he's this corporatist Democrat shift, which is backed by Wall Street. He flies to Arkansas to appeal to working class white voters who have been defecting to the Reagan Democrats, who have been defecting to the Republicans for a long time, to preside over the execution of Ricky Rector, I believe, who was a mentally ill, brain damaged black man. And this sort of like what Clinton does is he embraces the Reagan era. And that's when we begin to see it's not when we begin to see this shift, but it's definitely where it's in power and at play.
And the law and order and crime thing, he really leans into that with the war on drugs and the crime. But what did Hillary said? She was talking about like super predators in the black community or something like that. Really offensive stuff, right? Clinton made I would call, half-hearted effort at insurance reform, and just immediately said single payer, whatever you want to call it, Medicare for all, that's not even on the table. Yeah. So in all of these ways, you saw this movement. So the Republican Party by that time is moving steadily to the right, further right, and the Democrats are in lockstep. And this is the point at which you had like Democrats passed the Hyde Amendment. You had Biden supported the Hyde Amendment. Biden came out in favor of some restrictions on abortion. The famous case that went to the Supreme Court, Bob Casey, the governor of Pennsylvania, was Democrat, right? Yeah. So in all these cases, there's no move on. There was a brief move actually on gun control, and Clinton did do that, right? There was actually that moment where you had the assault rifle ban, which I'll give him some props for that. But in fact, even then, Reagan and Bush played a big role in getting that passed. They both came out in favor of the assault weapon ban. Reagan and George Bush Sr. did. By this time, Clinton, basically what you have is a Nixon-like presidency. Maybe worse, maybe even more conservative than Nixon. I mean, we talk about that and kind of it's a joke, but there's something to that.
The other big thing that Clinton does, which is really, where he's embracing the Reagan coalition or whatever, is he changes welfare as we know it, talks about the era of big government being over. And it's a little bit like the congressional Republicans who took the House in '94, challenged him to cut away all these safety programs. And he didn't really give a shit. So he did. And he runs like a Republican, and they didn't really know what to do with him. I will say that he had more political savvy than most of them.
Oh, that's the tragedy, right? He actually had some really significant political gifts, and he used it for garbage, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had Newt Gingrich, which really isn't that hard to do, but
no, and those guys did him a favor because like they swamped him in 1994, they crushed him in the election, and then they forced their agenda on him. The welfare reform was like John Kasich's idea when the crime bill was a Republican idea. And Gingrich and those guys overplayed their hands so much that Clinton was able to rally and win election again in 1996. But at that point, and that's when you see the Republicans really start to get down and dirty, right? With the impeachment over something was really, talk about trivial and insignificant, right? There are a lot of reasons I think Clinton should have been impeached, but not for Monica Lewinsky, right? Like I could give you 5 other reasons to impeach Clinton or anybody, right? And I think that's the point at which we really saw things go haywire. And then the scandals really took their toll and then led into the 2000 election, which I think for the left is really critical because they went all in on Ralph Nader. And I'm a huge admirer of Ralph Nader. And you and I both actually did a lot of groundwork in 2004 trying to get him on the ballot. But since that was really the only card they played, Al Gore had just a dismal campaign. I used to say it was the worst campaign in history until 2016. Gore's looks inspired compared to that one. But Gore didn't win his own state.
Dukakis in '88 was also not great.
That was pretty bad too. But at least Reagan had this media charisma bullshit aura about him, right? I don't think anybody would have beaten Bush and Reagan together. I don't think anybody would have beat Bush that year in '88.
Yeah.
But what Gore did was just dismal, right? And then and the thing is that, and again, the Democrats lose sight of this. The issue that really worked for Gore was actually the climate, right? Global warming. That's the one issue that he was making hay with that, and he just abandoned it and wanted to he refused to let Clinton campaign for him, and he ran away from Clinton. And Clinton and Gore, remember, were 2 of the founders of the DLC, and was in 1984 the Democratic Leadership Conference.
Yeah,
and this is the people running the country today. This is where they made their bones, right? In the DLC and in the Clinton era. So the folks in the Democratic Party running the Democratic Party today came up not in an era of Lyndon Johnson. Like they talk about FDR and LBJ, they're nowhere near that, right? They grew up in an era, and you notice like Pelosi and all, you ever see like they all praise Reagan. They go to the mat talking about how great Reagan was. So they would rather try to like appease a few Republicans and maybe peel off a few Republican votes than actually speak to their constituency and talk about working class issues.
Yeah.
And by the early 2000s, Bush won. He stole the election. Democrats didn't do anything about it. And I think at that point, after the impeachment, after stealing the election, it's clear that they can do whatever they want, get away with it. The Democratic Party, rather than fighting back, is just going all in on attacking Ralph Nader, right? And then that leads to a John Kerry candidacy, right?
Yeah.
Another boring, uncharismatic, patrician, Northeast elite, another guy from Massachusetts, right? And I think that's one thing that I keep going back to, and I'm more convinced than ever. Trump appeals to the worst of people, absolutely. And there clearly are people in his hardcore base who are motivated by racism and sexism and all kinds of ugly stuff, real anti-Semitism, stuff like that. But the one element in that I think the Republicans understood, and it's as phony as anything, but was the attack on elites, right?
Mm. Because
this is really you saw it somewhat with Clinton, but after that, the Republicans went all in on attacking the Democratic Party's party of coastal elites, and it worked. It really worked well.
And Trump in 2016, when he ran his primary in the Republican primary, when he started, everyone thought he was a joke. But he also ran that anti-elite campaign against his Republican primary opponents. He did that to Jeb Bush. He did that to Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz told him that he was the real champion of the working class, and Trump's response is like, "Your wife works at Goldman Sachs."
Yeah.
And he definitely went after the Bushes and destroyed Jeb Bush, also a coastal elite. And so, I mean, it was quite savvy, and it's also I also think it's his sort of game he's playing with the Republican establishment, which he's at odds with always.
The Republican establishment has distanced itself from Trump today way more than the Democratic establishment is driven, because it hasn't distanced itself from Biden at all. They're all in on Biden. They're cramming Biden down the throat, whereas
they're closing ranks. They're closing in with him.
Yeah. A lot of Republicans are like saying, "Oh my God, can we find somebody else?" It's really quite remarkable. And so the Bush years are really horrendous. And that led to Obama. Obama became president, and great, and like Clinton, I think he had real political gifts. But he also had the good fortune of running for the presidency amid a really unpopular war and the worst economic crisis since 1929, right? The crash, right?
And Bush fatigue was just everywhere, very prevalent.
But the Democrats, this is how freaking like clueless they are, right? He beat Hillary Clinton. He was a nobody. He was this unknown junior senator. He'd been in the Senate for 2 years before he announced he was running. And he beat the most well-funded, the most qualified candidate ever, right? And he beat her.
With the most name recognition of anyone who was running that year.
And no one in the Democratic establishment could see through that and say, "Oh, this is a canary in a coal mine." Hillary Clinton is really toxic if she lost to Obama and then lose to Trump. She lost to Obama and Trump. How do you do that? How do you do that? Not that Obama was a skilled politician, but Hillary Clinton had, like you said, the greatest name recognition. She was well known. She had every contact, every union endorsement, and Obama,
big city mayors were behind her.
What else is, I think, really useful to understand here, to remember here is, you know which politician came out for Obama and that made a huge difference? Remember? Got an endorsement from the best known Democrat in America at the time, Teddy Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
The Kennedy. And that should have been a harbinger too. The Kennedys represent this Democratic, and they rejected Clinton. Everybody rejected Hillary Clinton, right? And
I actually totally forgot about that. That's a good thing to note.
Yeah. So when Obama won, he ran this hopey, changey campaign, and it's inspiring. I think I'm stunned still. I never thought I'd see an African-American president.
From the organizing sphere, everyone who had been an organizer through the Bush years, whether it was anti-war or climate or labor or immigration or whatever, all flocked to work for his army of organizers. Yeah. And even though he lost California because Clinton was able really to play up the big city political machine game in San Francisco and Los Angeles, but all these little states, they just hit the ground and just organized, and they won all these little primaries and all these delegates as a result.
Yeah, maybe those people would have been better off if they kept working on whatever issues they were working on instead of anti-historical what-if stuff. But I think we'd be better off today if Romney or McCain had won back then. Maybe Romney's a little more, but McCain was nutty too. But
yeah.
No, and I think with Obama, you really see the kind of, I think the ultimate triumph of this kind of Clinton corporatism. I remember the night Obama was the election, it was inspiring, right? Like you get all choked up. And then they announced Rahm Emanuel was going to be his chief of staff. And it was like immediate deflation, right? And this is what you have, like elections don't matter. And like they don't change anything. In fact, in all these years, the liberals have always said, let's move them further to the left. We'll vote for them and we'll put pressure on them to move to the left, right? And we'll run leftists. We'll run we'll run Nader, or we'll run Sanders, or we'll run Jesse Jackson before that. Howard Dean in 2004 had a little bit of momentum for a while.
Mm.
Despite that, this country keeps moving to the right. It's further to the right than ever. How have these elections in any way stanched that at all? None, right? None. It's just, it's the bloodshed just continued. And as much as you want to blame Reagan and Bush, who are horrendous, right? But they were playing the role they were born to play. That was their Republican presidents, right? But Clinton and Obama, I think, are really ultimately even more responsible. And then 2016, Hillary can just, everything that happens today, really, she owns that. That's on her. She didn't go out and campaign. She didn't, oh my God.
You've read so many histories from people who were inside the Clinton campaign. It's like, why did we spend so much resources on Iowa that we're never going to win? And then we didn't do anything in Wisconsin, that sort of thing. And I find it, their strategy in 2012 and in 2016 in the Republican primary was to play up this wingnut. Romney was not a wingnut, but they were able to like really etch away at Romney in 2012 by playing themselves in the Republican primary. And then 2016, they did it to the point where they succeeded, where they were able to like help elevate this crazy person with like really bad politics, far right, racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever, transphobic bullshit politics. And I think part of the reason that she didn't run is that they're just so arrogant that they thought there was no way they were going to lose. There was no way they were going to lose to Trump. And not only that, but they're like based in the Rust Belt. He completely like, there's where he lost Wisconsin that night, and there's where he lost Michigan. And then when he lost Pennsylvania, I was like, these people don't know what they're doing. They're just like, they were too busy signing leases on condos in Washington because they weren't out actually doing their jobs, because they're like, gonna get administration jobs. This is such a no-brainer. The arrogance of the Eastern League is
and you know who was giving them warning signs? They ignored Bill Clinton, who's, if anybody you'd listen to, be him, right? They were ignoring him. He was the one saying, hey, this, but it just gets back. It's easy. And I see this all the time with liberals. They just, every day they attack Trump, and they attack Trump's voters, attack Trump supporters. They're stupid, and they shop at Walmart, and they're rednecks, and they're funny looking, and they dress funny, and all this shit. And no one is willing to take any account for it, right? And Hillary Clinton with her deplorables remark, and she's still doing it. What did she say the other day? Trump supporters need to be deprogrammed. A lot of them are nuts. QAnon, those people are beyond, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's insane, right? But you don't go around saying everybody who supports this guy is mentally, it's not a good political look, not good optics.
No, especially when they want to try and compete in states where those are a lot of the voters, right? Yeah. That's like Wisconsin, that's Pennsylvania, that's Ohio. Yep.
And Obama, to go back to that, remember, what was it, weeks after he was inaugurated, he went to Wall Street. And when he said, see those people out there with the pitchforks? I'm the only thing standing between them and you. So he creates this, the TARP fund was what, 700 billion, 800 billion, something like that for banks. There was another fund that I forget the acronym right now for homeowners, HARP maybe. And that was only subsidized at 300 billion. So it's less than half of what the banks got. And only about 10 or 15% of that was ever used. So very few homeowners got bailed out, but all the banks did. And that's who Obama took care of, right? Yeah. They extended the Bush era tax cuts, right? And you can talk about elections. Elections have consequences, yeah, but we're at the point now where they have nothing but negative consequences. And so all you hear is, this is the most important election of our lifetime. It's a choice. It's the most stark choice you've ever had.
Vote blue no matter who.
You have to vote blue no matter who. Trump is the worst thing ever, right? And all that, maybe, I wouldn't say that's all true, but after 40 years, people are just tired of it. It's too late. You can't go 10 miles to the right and then like reverse course and correct it. You can't. And defeating Trump gave them a chance to at least organize and start to move in that direction. And what's Biden, right? He's more concerned about Ukraine and Israel than East Palestine, Ohio, or Flint, Michigan, or Jackson, Mississippi, or anywhere. I don't study migration, so I'm not going to pretend I have any authority or expertise in the area. But I do know he ain't done it. He ain't fixed it. And all they talk during the camp, remember during the 2020 election, and Biden to his credit, understood that you had to campaign in Michigan and Pennsylvania and places like that. He was also
smarter than Hillary. We'll give you more credit.
Hillary. He's also running against the sociopath who had ignored COVID and let like 250,000 people die, although Biden probably has a bigger body count now, right? And so he becomes president. And these lefties who remember early on, you had people saying, "Oh, look at what he's doing." Even Doug Henwood, the seer of Brooklyn, the vicar of Brooklyn, was talking about how what a great start he had, and how these economic policies were really. Come, give me a break. You can see through that guy. During the campaign, he had said, he goes to, what was it, Goldman, and he said, "Nothing's going to fundamentally change. I don't have anything against you. I don't hate millionaires. I don't have anything against rich people."
Yeah.
But the long-winded point, which is something we say all the time, is if you think anybody's going to save you, Cornel West, Bernie Sanders, anybody, it just ain't going to happen. It never has. We've been dancing around this for over 50 years now, 55 years since 1968 election.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and the Democrats, not only, they've actually won the White House several times, but they also had no sense to organize beyond that. While, Obama ran a great campaign for Obama. Did you ever see the maps of Democrats in state government in 2008, 2016? Like in 2008, the Democrats had a majority of governors and state legislatures. By 2016, they had almost 9 because the Democratic Party ignored that level.
The stat at the state level of loss during the Obama years is something like 1,000 seats were lost.
Yeah.
In state legislatures and state houses through the Obama years. And that's why we got Scott. That's why we got Scott Walker and right to work laws in states that were like traditionally union bases in the country.
Yeah. Ohio is a great example. Ohio's a red state now. I hope Sherrod Brown wins, but Obama won Ohio in 2008
and 2012.
He won it again in 2012. Okay, I thought he barely lost, but
he barely won, actually.
Okay, but the point is, they still had a firm base, electoral base in Ohio. It's totally gone, right? Ohio is just forget it. Mahoning in Trumbull County.
Tim Ryan ran a good campaign last year, and
Tim Ryan and to JD Vance, who's insane, right? And where I'm from, Mahoning and Trumbull County, they both voted Republican for the first time since 1928 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You can, and the point here, which we're howling at the abyss. These elections aren't
That'd be a good title. That'd be a good title for this episode.
Howling at the abyss. Yeah, this is what we do. We do a lot of that lately. Yeah. But with an election coming up, they're cramming Biden down your throat. Biden's numbers are just in the tank.
Yeah, and I just want to say something about that too, which I find pretty interesting, which is Biden was already in the tank, but it still seemed like he had a chance. And then with this Israel thing and with the sort of like fury on the streets right now, like globally, like today, we're recording this on November 4th, and today is the biggest day of protest globally since February 14th or whenever it was in 2003 around the Iraq invasion. Like 300,000 people marched in Washington, D.C. today. The pictures from places like Berlin and London and Montreal, here in San Francisco today, where like massive crowds are out, and the Biden administration, which has been doubling down on support of Israel, all of a sudden realizes, oh, the backlash is going to be pretty bad with youth voters and Arab voters in Michigan and things like that. So they're running. I actually, every time I open up my Twitter app, I see an ad from Kamala Harris saying how they formed a task force to fight Islamophobia. And I'm like, why? The best way to fight Islamophobia is stop funding the Israeli war machine
and stop killing people in the Middle East.
Yeah, right? I also feel like that's why we saw those comments from Obama at that on Pod Save America today or yesterday or whenever that was too.
Also, there was a story today. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's very much shaping up to be like a 1968, to be honest.
Oh, no, it absolutely is. There could be a challenge at the convention against it. Something else that's worth noting, and I've only seen this in like not necessarily mainstream media or not like big media, places like HuffPost, but I'm inclined to believe it's true because I have seen it referenced elsewhere. But there are significant groups within the State Department now who are really getting fed up. You've already had at least one resignation, maybe two, I think. Well, one from the UN, one from the Department of State. But Blinken and Biden just cutting everybody out. They're doing this stuff unilaterally, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, didn't they say that today they said that they wanted the appropriations to be done in secret or something like that, or the aid to Israel?
Yeah, and also I'm seeing a lot of I haven't seen any resignations, but I'm also seeing a lot of buzz about people who actually work in the White House are like, this is like a really bad idea. I can't believe we've doubled down on this, and we need to think about how to get out of this.
Yeah, there was one kind of high profile resignation. I forget the guy's name. And then there's just been a lot of people working through the proper channels to voice their dissent within. But apparently the State Department right now is in bad shape, right? Morale is not good. And this is something like actually I studied, and it's quaint, right? Nobody talks about the State Department of diplomacy anymore because it really doesn't exist. But today I said that Blinken wants to be like the next Kissinger, or the new Kissinger, right? He's nowhere near as accomplished, obviously, or really he's not as smart as Kissinger. But on that like evil and demonic category, he's catching up. But yeah, it's just really.
And for folks listening, Blinken and Biden are going to be here in San Francisco in a week and a half for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. So if you're in the Bay Area or California or the West Coast, come out and join us. Just to put it out there.
Prepping for the next war against China.
Yeah.
Even though, even on the other front, the media now is reporting, I would assume candidly, about Ukraine. And essentially, the media consensus now is Ukraine can't win this war. And like two guys who do a podcast called Green and Red were saying that back
a year and a half ago,
2022. I don't think they'll lose, but all you're going to see is just this bloodbath. And so, which is why we always said the thing had to end. Yeah, it's a bad situation, but these elections, and if you look at the electoral history of the U.S., and just because I'm not the biggest advocate of electoralism, but it's a good way to gauge the way the country is headed. And it's so weird now because Trump has significant opposition within the ruling class and the military. And you and I have talked about that so much, right? And he still has it, right? Look at all these people. When Milley retired, how all these people came to his defense. And you have I've noticed like I follow like retired generals on Twitter. And they despise Trump, right? They're all gung-ho about the war. They're probably pro-Zionist too, but they hate Trump, right? And the Democratic Party's never been able to do anything with that. Essentially, their idea is we got to be more like Trump, right? We got to be more like the Republicans, right? And I think this week, the elections, there are two elections that I think they're turning badly: Virginia and Kentucky. The guy running for the governor of Kentucky is horrific. Cameron. He was the attorney general.
The Republican side. The
Republican, yeah, against Bashir. Bashir's the incumbent. They're close. But what's his name? Cameron is catching up. And he's horrific. He covered up the Breonna Taylor murder. He's covered up all kinds of cop murders. He wants to ban abortion outright. And then in Virginia, you have Youngkin, who won the election because do you remember who the Democrats ran against him a few years ago?
Terry McAuliffe. I actually think that governorship is up. I think that's the year after. I think it'll be in 2025. Youngkin got elected in 2021.
But there are delegate races this year,
yeah.
And the Republican Party may take control of both houses. Virginia has two, I think.
Yeah.
No, but Youngkin isn't running this year. The Republicans want to run for president.
One thing I read is Youngkin is actually the candidate that the donor class and the Republicans want to run against Trump, and he won't do it.
Right?
Yeah.
But who did he run against? Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah.
It's Hillary Clinton 2-0. You get this retread, this old hack who did 8 years and then was out of office, and you bring him back. And it's like making a sequel to a shitty movie. It's like remakes, right? Hollywood's always doing that. They're making movies that weren't good the first time, right?
That's all the Clinton and Obama's friends in Hollywood too, the people who make the shitty remakes that make a lot of money off of it.
I remember a few years ago they did a remake of Footloose or The Goodbye Kid. Like, why would you remake those movies? First of all, Goodbye Kid was a good movie. Second one sucked. Like, why? Find something new. The Democratic Party doesn't have a deep list of younger people, but they do have, much as he's not great, but Gavin Newsom at least is younger. He's combative. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. She's young. She's combative. She's really good at this too. She doesn't take their shit. And instead they shove Harris and Biden down your throat. And that's even telling. When the Democratic Party needs to choose a vice president or a Supreme Court justice, their first thought is an identity group, right? And this, like, Kamala Harris is not stupid, and there's nothing wrong, obviously, with having an African-American woman run as your vice president. That was the only criteria for her. That was like basically why she was chosen. She didn't have a lot of background. She has no legislative accomplishments. No one's going to mistake her for Phi Beta Kappa, but she fit that, right? And that's always the way they did. If I'm elected, I'm going to appoint the first Black woman to this. Nothing wrong with that, not at all. But the Republican Party doesn't do that. They actually do. What they do is they find women or Blacks or whatever who are as crazy conservative as they are. And that's the criteria. The criteria is who fits our ideological profile. And then we can find somebody to fit that. Democratic Party doesn't do that. They don't say we're going to find somebody who's going to uphold all of these values we believe in, right? They don't do that. Kamala Harris, can you imagine if Biden were to like croak out, man? Harris is president, that would be, oh my God. She would lose all 50 states.
Yeah.
It's
I feel like the one ideology that the Democratic establishment goes for is that sort of adherence to Wall Street and who can take the most money from the Wall Street lobbyists.
But they've always been like that. But there's no, you could do that if you're so inclined. You could do that and still be pro-choice and still be in favor of gun control and still legalize weed. Shit, nobody smokes more. Actually, they're doing coke on Wall Street, but they have no issue with drugs, right? Drug use. It's really sad and it's really scary. And a lot of people, you know, who are vulnerable are going to be even worse off. Freaking, who's the guy? Ryan Zinke wants to force all the Palestinians out. And Nimrata, what's her official last name? Nikki Haley wants to do that too, right? And there's something just like, particularly the hypocrisy and the vileness of people who are immigrants who now do that. I mean, I run into times like this all the time. It's just,
what's the only thing that, not that I think they have anything going for them any longer, because I also don't think voters really care about the level of crazy anymore. It seems like it's all just been unraveled. The toothpaste is out of the tube with Trump and the pandemic. But the one thing that the Democrats might have going for them is that they're going up against the Ryan Zinkes and Nikki Haley's and Donald Trumps of the world.
it's the only thing they can do.
Yeah, exactly. And like the fact that Zinke, I actually believe was the EPA secretary under Trump, who we actually got fired because he was so corrupt, and Haley wanting to ban Palestinians. That's basically what they want to do. They don't just want to ban Palestinians from coming in the country. They also want to deport any Palestinian that they can, and that's crazy.
Yeah, look at what they're doing.
I wish we could deport all the crazy right wingers after January 6th myself. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it's looking at Florida. They've DeSantis has banned Students for Justice in Palestine chapters at public universities. Yeah, he's taken over the new school. And the Democratic response to this is essentially send us more money, right?
The Israelis are banning all opposition to the war currently.
Yeah. Oh God, there's another case. His press secretary. This is not somebody who's really. That's not. I get it. If Sarah Huckabee Sanders can do it, anybody can. But the press secretary just ain't real bright either. And she said we're not allowed to use the word ceasefire for Christ's sake. When what's the Bernie Sanders humanitarian? Earlier you were talking about Gene Debs. I want to point out that 11 people. I don't know. A fairly big group of people sat in at his office the other day, and he had them I don't know if they were arrested, but he had the police
yesterday. Yeah,
it was yesterday. Yeah. Did Gene Debs have police remove anti-war protesters from his offices? No, he was with them. He was going to jail, right?
Yeah. I think he was the one doing the sitting in.
Yeah, of course he was. But I get it. Like the whole, like what you just said about,
and that's what Rashida Tlaib. That's what Green was trying to get her censored for. Is she was actually with the people sitting in the Capitol a couple of weeks ago with the Jewish Forces for Peace, and if not
Green called it an insurrection. Although I got it, Marjorie Taylor Greene wins the week though, because I think I sent it to you. Did you see the tweet she put out about Boebert?
No, I missed that.
She went off and she called her vaping, groping Boebert. Like when Marjorie Taylor Greene throws it down, and again she wins when you're playing the dozen. That's bad. When Marjorie Taylor Greene wins, actually the Colorado Republicans now are seriously thinking about running a primary challenge against Boebert.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, the Democrats also doing way better in the polls too. He's been raising a lot of money.
How do you lose to these people?
Yeah.
JD Vance and Mike Lee from Utah, who doesn't. The Speaker of the House doesn't believe there's a separation of church and state. He believes you should read the Bible. That's the only fucking answer to everything. Read the Bible. He's the third most powerful. He could be president.
Yeah.
And Biden could croak out any minute, and God knows with Harris, he may fall down an elevator. Who knows? He's not eating. Johnson could be president. It's just terrifying. It's freaking terrifying. It's funny too, because like a lot of Americans, especially the right-wing media, talks about Islam and Muslims and da da da. Nobody is crazier. No, well, maybe the Zionists, Israel, who think that it's okay to just like ethnically cleanse millions of people, but nobody is crazier than American Christians. And they're treated like the meat. I got to say, to some degree, the Democrats got a point. Like Trump he's a sociopath, but if you have you listened to him, he slurs his words, he mispronounces, he's messing with, and they're not talking about it. Like every time Biden slips, the one thing I got to say in a very negative way, unfortunately, given the way Biden's handling this shit with Israel, he's really got more going on than I thought. Unfortunately, it's for all the wrong reasons. But and I don't know what he was thinking. Like he's in a corner now. There is no reason. If you were Bibi Netanyahu and Biden said you need to pull back a little bit, what would you tell Biden?
Piss off.
Yeah, there is zero reason. He's got the money already. He knows Biden's not going to fucking pull the rug out from under him. So what does he care? What does he care?
Yeah, and the American, just look at how like progressives like Fetterman and Sanders are rolling over on this.
Fetterman's really bad, but that's not surprising given Pennsylvania's.
Yeah, it's true, but
he needs pro-Israel vote. No, I think it's appalling. I think it's disgusting.
But the fact that progressive politicians are all in on this, we don't have to get into how much whether Sanders is all in or not, but how all in they are, and there's no way the Biden Democratic elite are going to waver on this, no. and I think they would go down and crash their administration before they're going to waver on this.
And they will.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
I mean, it's not just the support, but they're playing into these horrible tropes where everybody's anti. The Iowa Democratic Party put out a statement. The Young Democrats of Iowa, some of the people in the Young Democrats of Iowa signed on to a statement which used the phrase "from the river to the sea." The Iowa Democratic Party said this is a call for genocide.
Yeah.
That is so disgusting and vile and filthy. That's never, ever meant that. It meant from the river to the, from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, Palestine will be free. And the occupation, right?
And that's part of that's them calling that a call for anti-Semitic genocide or whatever. Is the ADLs, that's been a big talking point with them for a long time. And the pro-Israel lobby. And so I'm sure they were happy to dive in on that.
Oh, sure. And the actual people who are doing genocide in Gaza are accusing everybody else of doing it. They're equating, like I've said last time, they're equating like the Tree of Life shooter who killed, I forget how many, like 18 Jewish people that day at that synagogue. Right? They're equating him with people who chant, from the river to the sea. They're both in it. And Biden, the way he's played into that, you can't pull that back. You can't put the toothpaste back in, right? And
did you see that the Iowa Democrats are actually demanding that the University of Iowa Democrats who signed that statement resign?
Yeah.
Do you know what'll happen to those kids? They'll either become Republicans or they are going to go join the forces in the street and become cynical leftists.
And look at the way they're doxing people. This is at Harvard. The students who signed petitions, Wall Street has their names. They said they'll never hire them. But this is on Biden. Biden is inciting people. I've said that Trump incited people to violence many times. Biden's doing the same damn. And clearly, with Israel, if you're going to stand up to them, and the only person who's ever come close to that was George Herbert Walker Bush and Baker. But if you're going to stand up to them, you can't go all in and then pull back 2 weeks later. It's too late. It's too late.
Yep.
And so this is going to play out. What I don't understand is, what was the course for the Middle East before? I don't know what they're thinking. Like, Israel was firmly in control. I know it wants like official control over all these areas. It wants to just remove Palestinians from Gaza altogether. It just wants to make them disappear, exterminate them, right? But this could have been done in so many different ways, and Biden just fell right into it, jumped in Blinken,
I think it's either the foreign minister or a deputy foreign minister, or maybe the defense minister in Israel, basically talked about how they're getting what they want, which is they're going to get to move into Gaza. They're also talking about they'll go into Lebanon next. And that will definitely spark a wider war. The Hezbollah is very well organized and they're backed by Iran. Yeah. And what do they think is going to happen?
No, that's what I mean. He never gave any thought to what could happen. It's amazing at that level. You think these people are smart? I saw this in Vietnam where you have all these guys in the military who were saying, hey, this isn't a good idea. And everybody's just ignoring it. And it's utterly insane. I don't know what they thought was going to happen. And it's terrifying. This has been going on. Like the media wants you to believe that history of the Middle East began on October 7th last month. And in the same way, this right-wing ascendance in America, it's been going on a long time, since the 60s. And the biggest reason for it, we can talk how horrible the GOP is, and I agree with all that. But when you don't challenge them, when you go along with their agenda, when you throw your own people under the bus. Biden right now is basically saying to all these groups who put him in office in 2020, go screw yourselves, drop dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's hemorrhaging. He's losing black support to Trump. He's losing immigrant support to Trump. He's losing, youth just won't vote. They're not going to vote for Trump, but they just won't vote. They won't go out and vote.
Yeah.
Arab support, he's down to 70%, where it had been like, I don't know, over 60, I think.
Yeah.
And he knows this, and he's moving closer and closer to the Grand Canyon, and he's going to fall off. It's horrible, but it's just a rant. But I think that political history is important to understand how we got to this place. And surely a bunch of nasty people did it, but the Democratic Party from Jimmy Carter on, Carter owns a big piece of this. Clinton and Obama are huge pieces of this, right? And look at the people they surrounded themselves with. That tells you a lot, right? When you bring in Rahm Emanuel and Larry Summers and all these guys, this is what you get. That's not a progressive agenda. Those aren't progressives.
Yeah.
And look at Robert Reich, lasted a year or two as Secretary of Labor, and then he was gone. And
yeah, and he talks a lot about being, if you read one of his memoirs, he talks a lot about being iced out early on.
Yeah,
by the Wall Street.
Locked in the cabinet or something like that. Or,
yeah, he was iced out by the Clinton and the Wall Street people.
Yeah. And this is why you have even union members now vote Republican, like 50-50. Union leaders. And this is really like, for Biden, this would be like a big moment, because Labor's like stronger than it's been in a long time. You have this like incredible, a significant UAW victory. No matter, I haven't looked at the details, but that's a significant victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they could be like using that momentum, but instead he's more concerned about weapons to Ukraine, weapons to Israel. The reason Biden vetoed the House vote on the aid to Israel, because they wanted that money to take away from the IRS. So Biden now also is seen as the guy who's supporting the IRS. Do you like the IRS? I don't like the IRS. I mean, I've never understood why liberals that was a hill they would die on, the IRS. If the IRS actually was like auditing rich people and collecting their taxes, then yeah, sure. But they don't do that either. These are where Biden's priorities are. Israel, the IRS, Ukraine, not a lunch program. How many kids in America can't pay for lunch? Do you ever see these stories where they're denied lunch because they have a bill, where they're denied lunch and he can throw billions, 105 billion was in the last appropriations bill, military, 105 billion. You don't give kids school lunches here, right? Kids, if
14 billion just to Israel,
Israel,
bomb the shit out of Gaza,
right? But no school lunches, no prenatal care, right?
Yeah,
it's just a hideous. It's a society gone. What did Martin Luther King say? Society gone mad on war, right?
Yeah.
I keep going back. King today, oh my God, can you imagine? He would be in prison, right? Called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today.
Yeah.
And if he did that, oh my God, can you imagine what the Democrats would do to him?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say
what they would do is just ignore them and not give them a platform.
I was going to say they would do to them what they did to Cornel West, but Cornel West did that to himself. Yeah. Anyway,
folks,
not a happy time. We should do a happy show.
Well, we're having a happy show. We'll have the happy vegan on or something sometime soon.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe do some vegan recipes or something.
Yeah, he'd love that. Folks, you've been listening to the Green and Red podcast, Howling at the Abyss, talking about a fairly important political history that more people need to know and understand. If you like what you're hearing, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening to this on audio platforms, please give us a rate and review. It helps us with the algorithms. And if you like what you're listening to, check us out on greenandredpodcast.org and hit that support button, or become a patron at patreon.com/greenredpodcast. Until then, we'll be talking to you again soon. We want everybody out there to go out and make trouble and misbehave. There's a lot of people doing that right now, and we think it's an important, powerful thing, and it's having an effect. And we'll have probably more episodes on that in the future. And we'll talk to you all again really soon. Catch you later.